Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another segment here of the Outer Realm. Please note this is a pre-recorded segment that we did earlier today. So we're not live technically, but we are still on the United Public Radio Network 105.3 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans this evening. So we are fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have basically been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We love and appreciate you. You have no idea. And big thank you to Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, the Sonic Surgeon, for his sponsorship of our intro and outro. So you can find all of Justin's music on anything popular: Bandcamp, Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, most streaming platforms. He is an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music. Just what you want for your parties. Let me tell you what, they are amazing. Tonight, you guys are going to be watching a person I call a friend, and really, really honored to have him here, Mr. Philip Mantle, who's coming all the way from the UK, and he's going to be discussing his newest book, because he has several, UFO Landings, UK, UFO Landings UK. So everything's always really awesome in the UK, just saying. So, so tonight this will be streaming on all of our regular platforms. So please watch for it on UFO Paranormal YouTube, on International Public Radio, UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials YouTube, and of course all of the Facebook pages, which will be, I guess, United Public Radio on Facebook, Joe Montaldo, UFO Undercover, News on the Flip Side, The Outer Realm, of course, and Canada's Most Haunted. You'll be able to find everything there. And of course, Amelia and I will be in chat with you, and we're fun. Okay.
We're there right now.
Right? Exactly. So we're fun.
Yeah.
So make sure y'all there. Yeah. You guys kind of get snoozy once in a while when we're not live. We're like, where's everybody?
Right? So talk to us, because we are there and we want to hear your thoughts, and we might be able to answer some questions that are not out there. So please join in. Yeah.
Exactly. Because otherwise it's like freaking crickets. So we're like, what's going on?
Yeah. Don't just turn us on and walk away.
I know.
Putting it out there.
Everybody's all chatty when we're live and we can't respond to everything. Come on.
Aww.
Yeah. So anyway, Amelia's getting snow right now. We have no snow.
In the air flurries somewhat, and it got cloudy. I hear Northern Ontario is getting 12 to 15 centimeters this week, from what I've seen.
And Laura Lee are getting, like, they have full on, like, mega snow.
They're hosts on our network. Yeah. They live in that area where they only have a month of summer, because we get 2. I think they have a month of summer, but it is pretty when you're up there, though.
When you're up there.
Yeah, it's very pretty.
I think they're finding it so pretty. And for the record, Della's got a show called The Delicious Recipe on Thursdays. And Laura Lee has the Angel Rock on Monday nights.
Yeah.
So there we go.
He'll be, yep.
Yeah, but they're basically not too fond of all the snow right now. So of course, they're the only people I know technically that far north. So,
I know people further north than them, and I don't get it. I'm just saying. I do like my 4 seasons. I like the winter. I'm not going to lie. I love it. Yeah, but I do like it from inside my living room in front of a fireplace. I think it's really pretty, right? But I do love 4 seasons. I couldn't live in a place where it just was the same temperature all the time. Honestly, it would drive me crazy. I do like the change,
Right.
but I have commitment phobias to
Right.
furniture, weather, and paint colors, apparently.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, that's why I like different seasons. But yeah, it's not something I would want. Like I couldn't live in Alaska. I couldn't live in Northern Ontario or even Northern Canada. I just couldn't do it. For me, I couldn't do it. But then again, I could never live in Florida. Just saying to all you Floridians out there, I know there's a lot of you that listen to the show. I couldn't do it. The humidity is too much for me.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
I like the little peaks and gifts.
I grew up in the north, and I loved it. It has its place, but as my father would say, you've become southernized. Yes, I have.
Yeah,
Yes, I have.
well, growing up in Toronto, even if you're in the city, even if it's snowing
Mm.
in the city downtown, we have what's called urban weather.
Right.
So the rooftops of the big buildings melt all the snow. So you're not
Yeah.
getting what you get in the suburbs. I didn't live downtown, but I worked downtown for
Right.
a lot of
Right.
years, and you barely saw it. And there's nothing prettier than walking through the city during Christmas, just saying.
That's true.
Yeah, especially downtown Toronto, the city is just lit. The streets
Right.
are lit.
Right.
But anyways,
So
it's spring.
enough of the snow talk. Yeah. Why don't we get to Philip's bio? It's very short and sweet. He is probably one of the biggest authorities on UFO / UAP, for sure in England, and if not, in general. So we're really lucky to have him.
Yes,
So,
we are. And Philip Mantle is a long-standing UFO researcher and author from the UK. He was formerly the Director of Investigations for the British UFO Research Foundation, BUFORA. I love that. It's like BUFORA.
I know.
And the
Genius.
Mutual UFO Network here, MUFON, representative for England. He is the founder of Flying Disc Press.
Right.
And we're looking forward to talking to him because he has more. Oh my gosh, he has done more research than anyone I think we've ever had on.
Yeah, he's very, very versed, and he's a wealth of information. He's got a huge collection of archives, and basically, pretty sure you can ask him just about anything. But he is going to be discussing his newest book, UFO Landings UK. And from what I understand, they're very unusual. He didn't just pop them. I'm sure he could have an entire encyclopedia of that stuff. But there's unusual things about the stories he's chosen. And I'm sure he'll talk about other things as well, because I'm sure he doesn't want to give the entire book away.
No.
But he's just such a delightful person. And of course, as a publisher, we do tend to bring on a few of his authors, which you guys have definitely seen before. And there's some really good ones coming up. That's part of Flying Disc Press as well. So, and not all UFO, just so you know, it's not all UFO.
No.
Right? So MG Stevens was, the Boogeyman Chronicles. That's not UFO, but I think it is. I think she's got some in there. She just
a little
unsure
bit.
of her. Yeah, unsure of her, just doesn't want to talk about. But
Sorry,
yeah,
I'm adjusting the stupid. This is terrible when you can see yourself. But anyway,
I know it looks like a mirror. It's like
it's horrible. It's like what the hell?
Myself here, yeah.
Yeah. Why is it sideways? My name's like this. Whatever.
Yeah, international radio. Here we go. I know.
What not to do on camera. That could be a blooper for what not to do on camera, right?
Honestly,
like what not
it's
to do.
really for us because, we're night owls. So, there's a reason we should have a show at night. It's like vampires don't like being out in the day, looking all washed out and stuff, right? So,
like if you're into Twilight, I should be glowing right now. I should be just glitter fast here right now. But anyways,
I know. It's just got the light coming in. Stop! Go away!
Yeah,
I know. But I personally love UFO stories, and I think it's because it's so much in the media right now. I think there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of stuff about disclosure. There's a lot of stuff with respects to sightings, and people are out there there we are. There he is. Hello.
Hi.
How are you? Is that very enthusiastic? Philip.
I'll do the same. There you go.
It's like
Right.
this, actually. I just like to say one thing before you. First of all, how are you?
I'm from hunky dory. Can't complain.
Hunky dory. I love it.
Excellent.
I have one thing to mention before Michelle starts you on the show, because I saw this on Google when I was researching you, and I was laughing so hard. I hear that upon your passing, which we hope is not for many, many, many years, you are donating all of your research because you are in fear of your wife tossing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, my wife thinks I'm nuts, and she did when I met her. So I have 2 daughters and a stepson, and none of them are interested in it.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Colleagues of my age have been speaking about this for a couple of years. What do we do with our respective collections?
Suggestions.
I've been on.
Oh wait, no, this way.
I've been on friendly terms with David Marler out in Albuquerque. David
Excellent.
has an amazing archive. Not only that, David his archive, when he's gone, will end up at the University of New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So
Excellent.
it will be stored and made publicly available, ad infinitum. So when the time comes, I don't know if you can see now. You can't see them. There's some boxes. Yeah, just behind me. There's some boxes.
Yes.
They're already being boxed up slowly but surely, and when they're ready, then they'll be off. Across the Atlantic.
Well, let's hope that's not for many, many, many years to come. I do understand that what your situation is, because I am only allowed to have my stuff in this room, and I'm starting to trip. So but I'm leaving everything to Michelle if I pass before her. And Michelle has agreed to be the one that comes into this room because there's a few haunted objects, and my daughter will not come in here. No, and my husband's like, no.
Branched out elsewhere in the house. I've got material, in the garage, out in the hallway.
Yeah.
Cases in the other room.
It's just part of life.
Yeah. That's just the way it goes.
Well, we're grateful.
Yes, honestly, people don't realize the man hours that goes into any sort of research, but especially this sort of research. You should just. It's so hard to even catalog anything that vast, but we'll come to that. So welcome officially. I'm just like, it's nice to actually meet you because, we communicate over email. So it was nice to see the face and hear the voice behind the messages.
Well, I hope it wasn't a disappointment.
No.
Oh, no.
Hardly.
We've been looking forward to having you. We really have.
No.
Yeah.
How I usually like to start, you'll find that you're going to get to do most of the talking here because the Outer Realm is very roundtable like, but really laid back. And it's important to us, of course, that, we do have millions of listeners and we'd like them to get as much information about you as possible. But I do like to start with humble beginnings because we all end up on these paths. And usually there's something that triggers, the onset of that path. So maybe it's a sighting, an experience. So the stage is yours. Where would you like to start?
Yeah, well, I'll start and, we'll let people know how I got involved in the subject.
Excellent.
I'll take it from there.
Yes, absolutely. The stage is yours. Anything you want.
Well, if I go back to my childhood,
yes.
I remember my late mother came from Northern Ireland, and she told me the story many times that where they lived in Northern Ireland was quite, remote, and she had 5 miles to walk to school on a morning and 5 miles back. Wow. So I don't think she went an awful lot, to be honest, but
no.
She used to play down by the stream, and she said when she was a little girl, she met a fairy. A lady fairy with pretty dress and wings, and she conversed with it. And even when I grew up, I asked her this story. I said, was it real, Mum? She said, yeah, it was real to me. She told my children, her grandchildren. And so, I always had that in me. And growing up, I was always interested in all things paranormal, for want of a better phrase. I remember at high school, after the summer holidays, we'd go back to school and the teacher would say, I want you to stand up and we'll have a chat about what you did during the summer holidays. Some went on holiday or vacation, as they say in the States. And other girls riding a pony. What about you, Philip? Oh, I went to the spiritualist church. And so I was quite fortunate.
There's that Philip kid again, just being weird.
My best friend's grandmother lived literally opposite us, right across the road. And she used to go to the spiritualist church. So I would go with her on occasion. I found it fascinating. Would read anything I could lay my hands on it. And I was also interested in astronomy. And I remember one book on astronomy, it had one chapter on UFOs, basically dismissing them. But yet elsewhere in this book, there were things about astronomy which were theoretical, etc., but they seemed to accept them. And I found that quite ironic. But nonetheless, it sparked my interest. So when I left high school at 16, not really knowing what to do with myself, I still found this interest. It wouldn't go away. It had lit the fuse. So a few years after I left high school in the winter of 1978, I went to work in what was then West Germany. And I worked over into sort of May of the following year. While I was there, I couldn't speak a word of the language, so I asked my mum to send me some books. And this parcel arrived, and it was all UFO books. I don't know where she got them from, but it was a box full of them.
Wow.
So, instead of trying to pretend I could watch German television on a night and try and figure out what was going on, I was reading this stuff, and it just got me more and more, engrossed. And then when I came home, the Spielberg movie Close Encounters hit the big screen, and I saw that. And my aunt, who lived just round the corner from us, I live in the north of England, near a city called Leeds.
Yes.
For those that are trying to figure out where we are, I'm about 60 miles from Liverpool.
Leeds University.
Because of the Beatles, But so in Leeds, they publish a nightly newspaper called the Evening Post. My aunt brought this newspaper around, and there's a small advertisement in it for the formation of the Yorkshire UFO Society. I live in the county of West Yorkshire, and it was coming up that Sunday.
Wow.
So I thought, I'm going to go to this. And in those days, like this, in the UK, on a Sunday, I mean, the whole of the country were like a ghost town. I mean, everything closed, literally. Right. So I didn't drive. I got the bus into Leeds. I found this location, and there were about 20, 30 people there.
Wow. That's a good turnout, considering.
Yeah, and the Yorkshire UFO Society was formed by two brothers, Graham and Mark Birdsall. They'd all already been involved a number of years, and they put on a presentation, and that was me hooked. I felt I'd found my niche in life. I felt I'd almost come home, if you like. I felt so at home. Mm-hmm. And we had monthly meetings. I paid a £2 membership fee for the year, and I just became engrossed in the subject thereafter. The following year, we were quite lucky because we started receiving lots of sightings from an area called the Yorkshire Dales National Park, beautiful part of the country in North Yorkshire. Right. So that was it. I was up and running, and never content just to sit there like a wallflower. I wanted to get involved, and it gave me the perfect opportunity to do so. And that's how it all began for me.
Wow. National parks seem to be a real hot zone for UFO activity. At least here in the West, United States seem to get swarmed with them. Did you end up getting your sightings? Well, what was your first sighting like? What kind of an experience was that?
Funny, about a year later, there was a place, there's a market town in the Yorkshire Dales called Skipton. It's well known. Just outside of Skipton is a small village called Carlton. And above that, there were the moors, and simply called Carlton Moor.
Right.
There was no, places to live there. It was few and far between. It was basically heather rather than cattle or sheep. They used to they have game birds there, like pheasant and so on. So it was in and around these hills and dales around Carlton Moor that we had a lot of sightings. So my colleague Graham Birdsall said to me one evening, "Shall we go to Carlton Moor for an hour?" Okay. It was about, it's about 90 minutes drive. It's not that far. So we put ourselves in a vantage point where we'd been many, many times before. You could see right across the moor. There is no buildings, no dwellings, no roads. And we were, chatting about the football and whatever. And then right in the distance, this little light appeared on the moor, not high up in the sky. Graham looked at me and I looked at him. We knew there was nothing there, and it remained there. So we decided we'd go and investigate. Down behind the moor was another little village called Lothersdale. And I still couldn't drive, so we jumped in Graham's car. Now, Graham used to drive like a madman at the best of times, so he's literally herring across the moorland. And it's pitch black. There is no street lights. There is no buildings. There's nothing. And these areas are known for their dry stone walls. All the fields have walls around them, and the walls are built out of stone, but with no concrete, no mortar. And I'm looking out of the side window, and then I just got a view down. There's a little valley. I got this view down the valley, and there was this enormous, I don't know what to call it. It looked like a cartwheel in the sky, all coloured lights. If you see a Ferris wheel or the London Eye or something like that, multicoloured lights just hanging in the sky. I don't mean a little thing in the distance. I mean right there. Right. I screamed at Graham, who hit the brakes, and we jumped out and climbed over this wall. But we couldn't see anything. Graham was as mad as anything because he hadn't seen it, because he'd been trying to keep us on the road. So we followed the road down into Lothersdale, and there's a circular route, this little road that takes you all round the moor. So we circumnavigated the moor. Didn't see anything else. Graham pretty much just cursed and swore all the way around because he'd missed it. I was mad as hell because my camera was in the boot, or the trunk of the car, as you would call it. But I literally saw this thing for, in the blink of an eye, and then it was gone. What it was, ladies, I have no idea. But make of it what you. But it was consistent with some of the reports we'd had from these areas. From the local farming community, people like that. And I'd never seen anything. There's nothing there. There's no buildings. There's nothing, so make of it what you will.
But do you find, like when you're saying, speaking with the farming community, do you find that the remote areas have more sightings than, let's say, in the city? You're looking at populace, of course, but do they tend to come where it's a little more quiet for them?
They certainly did in those days. For whatever reason, in these areas in and around Skipton, in the hills and dales and moors, is sparsely populated. But we used to make ourselves as visible as possible. We would, pester the living daylights out of the local media. We would leave flyers in pubs and libraries, anywhere we could. And we were always amazed how people found us, What we did one year is we put a caravan on the top of these moors, and we manned it for 7 days, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was there for the whole time.
Wow.
And we did some local media and encouraged the locals to come and visit us. And they had to come out of their way, and they did. And what we found was that, yes, people were reporting a lot of sightings now, but these were not, these sightings went back decades, if not hundreds of years. You know, some of these people come forward and said, I saw it in the 1940s and the 50s, and my father lived here before me and he saw strange things. We also found that it wasn't just UFOs. We found by digging a little bit more that a whole raft of paranormal phenomena was reported in the same area. I'll give you one example.
Please.
What we call an elderly couple, you know, they've got in their retirement days. And at this time in life, where Skipton was, there wasn't a large supermarket nearby. So they had to go out of town to travel to the supermarket. So they would do this trip once a fortnight, same time, same day, same route. They'd drive out to the supermarket. And they're coming back one night and it's dark. And they said, oh, look, there's a factory in the field. So set back in this field is a you know, a building with all the windows on, all the lights on, looked like it was in, they thought it was a factory. Lo and behold, they went back a fortnight later and guess what? There was no factory there. There is no factories there. There's no buildings there at all. Wow. And they couldn't figure it out. So we got a map out and we asked them to show us the route. And they said, well, it's here. It's simple. Then we get on this road and it takes us all the way there. And we drove that route in daylight and there is, you know, nothing there at all. We were also quite fortunate that one of our members was a police sergeant based in the area. And he got, as another example, he got called out to a burglary one night. And he got to the house and he said, what's been stolen? And they said, well, nothing. And he's thinking, well, what you called for? And nothing was stolen, but a lot of the items in the house had just been turned upside down.
Wow.
Placed back where they were, you know, vases were turned upside down, paintings, you know, but nothing was stolen. There was no forced entry, no windows broken.
Just upheaval, basically.
Objects in the house, everyday things were just turned upside down.
Almost like a poltergeist kind of.
Well, and the same policeman, he got called out to a fire at a house one night, and he arrived before the fire brigade did. And he says, in our training, what you do, you kick the door open, but then you go down on your knees when you enter the building because the heat rises. It's, you know, and so he crawls in on all fours. The fire's in the living room, and he opens the living room door, and there's a man there on the floor, and there are flames coming out of his torso.
Good grief.
And only his torso.
Wow.
And so, and another example, that another little village, this gentleman wrote to us and we phoned him up. So we made an appointment to see him. And when we got there, when I say it's a village, it's a bit of an exaggeration. There was about 6 houses. That was it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So it's just really like a campground.
Yeah. And none of these houses has a number on the door. So we knocked on the first door and said, this lady came to the door. I said, we're trying to find Mr. I can't remember what his name is now. And she said, oh, have you come about the ghost dog? I said, what's that? And she said, you know, these two balls of light, red light, will float down through the village, and they were the eyes of the ghost dog. But they were just balls of light. You know, they didn't actually see a dog. So this was all in the same area where we were getting these reports from them. And why it was in these areas, your guess is as good as mine. It really is. But they were there nonetheless.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a connection between paranormal events and UFO activity?
Well, you know, I've often argued perhaps
like
they are the, you know, different sides of the same coin.
Exactly. Yeah, I would agree.
Because if you'd have seen these lights, you may have called them UFOs. This lady, you know, called them the eyes of, you know, the ghost dog.
Yeah.
But in fact, it was the same thing. So it was a question of either interpretation or how you perceived these events.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I know a lot of people I've worked with through the years have also had extraterrestrial activities, you know, going on within their homes. They've had sightings as much as thinking that something was growling at them. And we've had other researchers that have come forward and said, "Oh no, a tall white can growl at you." I'm like, "What? Really?" I just can't envision it, but okay.
No, I know. That was a little surprising.
Yeah, but so what that taught us, that when we went to speak to somebody in these areas, we would ask generally about other things, and they said, "Well, it's funny you should mention that," but and then you learn about the history and the culture and the folklore of these areas. We found out up on some of the fenland in the area that witchcraft was still practiced, but the old Wicca. And the way we found that out was because the police were called out again, because walkers and hikers were finding little bundles of clothes, but these were clean clothes. It weren't something somebody had thrown away, and they thought somebody had, fallen foul, but it was the local Wicca that was practicing there. They weren't doing anything illegal. They weren't running around naked, or certainly if they were, I never saw them.
Right.
So they bundled their clothes up and put some kind of robe on.
Yes.
And we'll go off and do whatever it is they do, and and all this is in the same area, and it was a real mixture, and a real fascination and a privilege to be involved at that time and investigating all this kind of stuff. I thought
it was fairly new, right? It's not like today, for example, there are so many people doing it, whereas then it was sort of in its infancy for the most part.
Well, that's it. I mean, we had our membership at the society grew, but people who were actively involved, we had a small handful of people like myself and others, and like-minded groups around the country. There were lots of local groups, and there was a national UFO organization. You're right. At the end of the day, the people who were actually serious about this investigation-wise were few and far between, which was great. I didn't mind that. Come and tell us. We'll certainly take a look.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's great that you found, a group of people who are of like mind, because again, that's just not like something. I mean, I think the paranormal movement was really big way back then. Yeah, parapsychology was really big, especially in England. I always look at at England as being, the starting point. The infancy of everything seemed to start there. And UFOs, that whole study was just something, if it was active, it was buried.
Yeah. And we had a lot of fun as well. I mean, we weren't just a miserable bunch of anoraks wandering around. I'll give you an example. That week, we had the caravan on the moors. One night, all of us but one went to do a lecture, and we left one young fella in the caravan on his own, on the moors, in the pitch dark, and he was watching the TV. And when we got back, he said, "Oh boy, am I glad to see you come back." I said, "Why? What's the matter?" And he said he'd been watching this vampire film, and it scared the living daylights out of him. It was a TV series, a little mini series called Salem's Lot.
Yes.
About vampires, and he's on the moors. There's nobody else there. The wind is whistling.
Yeah, it'll get you.
Oh boy, I'm glad to see you back. So we had some fun as well. I mean, the very first night we were there, we were stood outside the caravan, and the moorland sloped away down behind it, and we saw this light coming up across the moor. And I thought, "What's this?" And it was the local gamekeeper. That was his torch. And he had a shotgun under his arm. And he said, "What are you lot doing here?" So we explained to him. He thought we were, saboteurs, because they do game bird shooting on the moors.
Oh, okay.
And he turned up with a shotgun,
And you don't want to be lurking around at night, basically.
Thankfully, we had, membership cards that we'd had printed and things like that. So we had to show him all this to ensure him we weren't there to sabotage the game shooting that was going on. Although we never heard any, we never saw any, maybe, somewhere else. But that was we only been there a matter of hours, and there's a man with a shotgun saying, "What are you doing, boys?"
Wow.
Yeah. Well, then, let's tell you what we're doing.
I imagine you'd have to be somewhat lighthearted to be in a group like that as well, because of the seriousness of it, and the locations, how you were out in the middle of nowhere. You need a little bit of lightheartedness to get through that.
Well, that's it. I mean, Graham Birdsall, he went on to publish UFO magazine, which was hugely successful.
Wow.
Sadly, Graham died, suddenly a few years back. But he would, if something went wrong or you made a mistake, he would never let you forget it.
Everybody needs a friend like that.
Yeah,
Not really, but okay. Yeah, but yeah. No, I love it. Statistically speaking, because you do track this, I read an article recently that Ireland is supposed to be, in the UK, the location with the greatest sightings of UFOs. Do you agree with that, or do you?
Not really. I mean, it just, they said it was Bonnybridge in Scotland for a while, and,
Right.
and there
Moves around.
there was a lot of sightings in Bonnybridge at the time. But it's like
Right.
when we first started, areas in and around the Yorkshire Dales had a lot of sightings,
Right.
and then they'll pop up somewhere else. So I don't think there's. But what we find in these areas, when they're active, sometimes there is a peak of activity for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then it seems to tail off, but you'll always get a residue of happenings, reports, sightings coming from these areas. You know that sooner or later something else is going to crop up. And it's a good question. Why are there peaks and troughs in the sightings? The answer is I don't know. There just is. So there are places where people call them hot spots or window areas or portals.
Yes.
Whatever. The places like Hessdalen in central Norway. There is the Inman lights in Australia. There's the Marfa lights in Texas. And on we go. But why that is, your guess is as good as mine.
Right. Well, we certainly know that Europe and the UK has a share of, energy spots, sacred spots, like such as Stonehenge, pyramids. Places like that seem to. I mean, there's regular sightings, so there's got to be something to it. Are they portals there? Oh, maybe. Some people believe so. Some people believe that UFOs will travel with ley lines and such. It's I guess they all cross at these power spots. The ancients seem to know where they were. But I don't know, it's fascinating. So as you delve into sightings, I mean, you must be getting swarmed with them now. Everybody's got a camera phone, everybody's out looking, and there's this whole new movement of, the CE5 thing where people are actually going out and calling for sightings. Do you guys have that in England? Is it getting pretty rampant over there?
I mean, I don't know if we'd say it was calling, but we would go up on these onto the moors many times, hoping to witness the phenomenon. And I managed the only ones. Right. I wasn't calling it. We were talking about the football,
Right.
But it's not something I've got involved with. But I know people that have, and they believe that you can do this.
Yeah.
That there are certain locations that are better for it, like you mentioned, hot spots. But that's not my cup of tea, I'm afraid.
Right.
I just ran with whatever came our way, and some people kind of specialize in one area of the subject or another.
I was just wondering if you were actually getting more contact because of it, because you're sort of the go-to authority on this stuff. So as people get more contact, they got to get that information out to someone, right?
Well, that's it. I mean, a gentleman contacted me the other day about this being he'd seen in his house. Now,
sounds like fun.
And he was adamant that it was physical because he was in the dark.
Right.
There was this figure. So he went to put the light on, and he claimed that this figure got in his way, trying to prevent him, and he could feel it.
Oh.
Of course, when he switched the light on, it's gone. So,
right.
The story's a bit longer than that. I've condensed it. But,
yeah.
so it's how do you interpret this? And he said, I don't know whether this was a ghost, a demon,
Right.
an alien, whatever. He
What
says,
did it look like?
Philip, he said it was physical. He said that it was
Yeah.
trying to prevent me from putting the light on. I could feel it.
But he couldn't see it, Philip? Could he see it?
Oh yeah, he could see it.
Did he describe it?
Yeah, he described it as like a cloaked figure with a hat or something.
Oh, that sounds like a shadow person.
Well, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And he thought, I want to get a better look at this. Therefore, I'm going to put, it seems obvious, I'm going to put the light on. That's, if you ever watch a horror film, you think to yourself, you're wandering around put the light on,
No, exactly. Keep one next to the bed, nightlight. It's easy.
Well, he wanted to do it. And he said, but this thing got in my way as if it was trying to prevent me from putting the light on. And I could actually feel it, you know. And he said, I don't know what it was. So, you pick again, it's how you interpret, how you perceive what happens. And at the end of the day, the way I've dealt with this is whatever this gentleman is happy with calling this thing, who am I to say any different? If he's and he was just happy that I replied. This came in on email, So things come my way, all different types of things, as they did right from day one.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's difficult. Our field is the same. Some of the stories that come in that I've looked at over the last couple of decades, I just leave me scratching my head. And now I start to be able to, I mean, as we evolve, even in research, I'm able to connect the dots in different ways and connect a lot of paranormal to UFOs and extraterrestrials and interdimensional or just dimensional, multiverse, you name it. There's so many different variables, time travel, time slips. It's just, you have to just keep evolving with the research because I don't think we'll ever really know everything.
Well, I used to be a conference organizer, and one year we hosted best-selling author Richard. We wrote Communion, and he was the main speaker that evening. And after his presentation, which was excellent, by the way, it was a question and answer session, and somebody said, are we getting nearer to finding the answers, etc. And Whitley made a very telling statement as far as I was concerned, and he said, we're learning to ask better questions.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think that's happening even more now. We are learning to ask better questions.
I think that's the key.
Well, there's less stigma around it, right? So people are more comfortable with asking what they really want to know.
Well, I think
when I first started, there was a hell of a stigma. And when I wrote my first book in 1994, which was about missing time and alien abductions, people were very reticent to allow us to use their real names or even permit an interview, and this is pre-internet days.
Right.
I traveled the length and breadth of the UK interviewing people in person because that's pretty much it was cheaper than the telephone. Because
no kidding. Sadly,
there was a number of people I interviewed and they said, "Oh, you can't use my name, or you can't publish this in any way." Even Whitley, when he came over, he was on a nationwide, primetime chat show here. The host was a gentleman called Terry Wogan, and all he did was make fun of it. But that's different now. The BBC have a very serious news program every night. It's called News Night, and it's very serious. And they even covered UFOs on that.
Excellent.
And whilst the presenter had a little smirk on her face at the end, the actual piece they did on it was very serious. So there's a big shift there. There's a big difference, and long may it last.
Absolutely. I think too with when the United States came up with their disclosure.
I know you have to do the air quotes on that because it was such a joke.
It wasn't it was a preliminary disclosure. So I'm sure there's good juicy stuff that we're not getting. But I think with that, when that came in last year, I think it started opening more doors to people taking it a little bit more seriously. Because, I mean, you guys have been disclosing, every country in the world seemed to be slowly disclosing. And the US was sort of the last to get on board, but it was enough to get people taking it a little more seriously.
Yeah, the subject's moved into the mainstream, and
Yeah.
it's not the first time it's done that, but it's
Yeah.
done it. And let's hope it stays there,
Mm.
and continues to be looked at in a serious manner, not just here but around the world.
Mhm.
That's why, when I started, there were colleagues saying the government's going to tell us everything, and I kept saying, well, who the hell is the government?
Exactly.
I was
Yes.
going.
Yes.
What do you mean?
They don't tell you anything good anyway.
Then there was a thing called Operation Right to Know in the States, where they had their placards outside the White House. Oh, the government again is going to tell us.
Right.
And now it's come around again. Now they call it disclosure. And guess what? The government's going to tell us. But well, don't hold your breath.
Nothing. They're going to tell us nothing.
Let's assume that UFOs are, vehicles from elsewhere.
Yes.
Who would you believe if somebody announced that? If somebody was going to disclose that?
Mhm.
Would you believe the president of the US? Bearing in mind, the US has its.
I barely believe anything that comes out of his mouth.
Would you believe the United Nations? They've got a pretty poor reputation of late as being just a talking shop. Would you believe, I don't know, His Holiness the Pope?
No, I agree with you. You make a really valid point. You don't trust these people just for regular information, let alone something that's deemed out of this world.
Expecting one of these bodies to announce something, let's assume, Joe Biden did it tomorrow.
Right.
There'd be his opponents would say, the old boy's gone nuts. I told you not to go for him.
It's true.
There's others, around the world who are not connected to the Western media, so they wouldn't know about it in the first instance. So
there has to be an authority then.
Yeah, but who? With the president, there's deeper levels of government that, with military and so on, that they don't even disclose information to the president because he's considered holding a temporary position.
Absolutely.
So it wouldn't be him who has any knowledge. I mean, I believe there have been a few past. I mean, we're in Canada, but I believe that throughout history, we look back and we see now that there have been past presidents that have spoken, very frankly about it. President Reagan was one of them. Was it Carter, Michelle, or was it was Carter, right? And he's still speaking about it. Like it's still going on.
There's got experiences with,
but Reagan really wasn't a politician, air quotes again.
Politicians are here today and gone tomorrow.
Yes, but they had their own personal experiences.
The civil servants, they're not elected.
No.
They are hired to do a job, and they're. But we also have to remember that it is the duty of our governments to keep secrets.
That's true.
It is, and
sometimes it's not the information itself that is the secret; it's how they've gathered that data in the first instance.
Mm-hmm.
We have a thing here called the Official Secrets Act, and somebody will say, "Oh, I can't tell you because I've signed the Official Secrets Act." It was brought in during the First World War. That's how out of date it is. Now, I had a friend who worked in a textile mill. They made cloth. And he said to me, "Philip, I've signed the Official Secrets Act." I said, "Don't be daft. I thought I was trying to make fun of me." He said, "No, I have." I said, "Well, why have you signed the Official Secrets Act?" He says, "Because some of the cloth we make is used for military dress uniforms. There's nothing special about it. There's nothing extra scientific about it because we use it for other things as well.
Right.
But because it's used for the military, I have to sign the Official Secrets."
That's insane.
They didn't know anything secret. So, it's all encompassing. And you will get individuals who say, "Oh, I can't tell you because I've signed the official secret." That's just a cover. It's
Right.
nonsense. It's absolute nonsense.
You've always got your whistleblower somewhere. I mean, look at Rendlesham. I mean, that was a huge event, and everybody knew about it. It's like, it got leaked out.
People who live locally knew about it before anybody else. Before it made the newspapers and the headlines.
No, that's true.
By the way, I am a publisher as well. I run Flying Disc Press. We will have a new book out later this year by the very first investigator of Rendlesham, a lady by the name of Brenda Butler.
Oh, would love her.
She still lives in the area, and she's co-authored it with a chap by the name of Philip Mantle. So it's about a whole host of things that happened to her and, in and around the Rendlesham Forest area.
Wow, love it.
That'll be out in September of this year.
Oh, exciting.
We best book her right away then, because we're already booking into the end of July.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, if we'd allow it, we'd be booked into January. That's what happened last year.
It's what we
were booked in January by Easter.
Everybody knows about the encounter at RAF Woodbridge.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. They're not familiar with all the other things that have happened in and around the area. So it's another place that strange things have happened.
Right.
The area was used for the military. Back during the Second World War, they tested what was a new invention at the time was radar there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all kinds of other things have happened in this area. Things have happened to Brenda herself, and that will all be revealed, later this year.
Oh, excellent. Well, we want in on that, but like I say, sooner rather than later, we'll be out by the time September comes. We'll be into 2022 easily, or 23.
Co-author Philip Kinsella, he's also, had his own experiences and sightings, one of which was in Rendlesham Forest, not in 1980, but at a later date, and it's all explained in full. So fascinating stuff.
I love it. Well, you guys always, your people always have a place here on the Outer Realm. Always. Oh, pleasure. You have a new book, and now this book is not just basic UFO landings, because I'm sure you've investigated several of those, but these are all special cases. Like they're all different, unusual.
Well, when I first got involved with ufology,
right.
The very same year, 1980, we were contacted by a local lady. I live in a small town called Pontefract.
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
We have another friend.
We have a friend there.
Yes.
So the next town down the road is called Normanton. And a lady telephoned us from Normanton, and she said, "You won't believe me. You won't believe me." And I said, "Well, give it a chance. You haven't said anything yet." They reported a UFO landing. So I went to speak to this lady. She was called Mrs. Westerman. I wasn't allowed to use her name at the time.
A landing, Philip? Sorry to interrupt you. A landing. A landing. Wow.
A landing case in daylight. What Mrs. Westerman told us, where she lived was what we call an elevated house. So you had to walk up some steps to get into the front door. She lived on a cul-de-sac. So there was no road going through at the end. There was a little road outside, and five of her children.
Area is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
5 of her children were playing a ball game outside, and the ball went up in the air, and this thing, in beautiful day, came down at an angle, stopped in the air, and dropped into some fields that lay beyond the cul-de-sac. There's some fields and some trees and electricity pylons. They're running the house, and Mrs. Westham is just washing the dishes after lunch. And they said, Mum, there's an aeroplane landed in the field. So she came out the front door, and because it was an elevated house, she could see across these fields. And she said it wasn't an aeroplane. She said it looked like a Mexican hat shape, but it was like a silver grey. So she got hold of the children. They walked down the cul-de-sac over towards this area. And at one point, you go down a small dip, So you lose sight of the area. They come up the hill at the other side, and this field is bordered by a fence. And they are literally standing at this fence, and it is yards away from them. It's on the ground.
Wow.
Now there are several tall men. They have some kind of visor on, some kind of all white. They don't have gloves. They have mittens. They could see that, and they're waving something over the ground. The children weren't scared at all. They were trying to get over the fence, and she's holding them back.
Yeah, we don't care. Throw
Children are
caution to the wind.
fearless. Children are fearless.
At
Yes.
this point, these three men walked to the rear of this thing. It rose back up into the sky, stopped again, and was gone. And you know, we interviewed them all. They didn't call it a spaceship or aliens. We even interviewed one of the children's friends. He hadn't seen anything, but he'd gone home for lunch and he'd missed it. And when he came back, he said they were all telling me about it, and he was a bit miffed. You know, they missed it all. Now, the area then, back in 1980, where this happened, was a big industrial area. All around here was all coal mines. Mrs. Westerman's husband was a coal miner. My father was a coal miner all his life. So these were the kind of people I grew up with. I knew what type of people they were. She wouldn't let me take a photograph of her. I wasn't allowed to use her name. The children were playing a made-up and invented ball game. I used to play the very same game when I was their age. You won't see it played nowhere else. You know, it's not cricket or anything, you know.
Right.
And they had no idea what it was. No idea.
Wow.
And what it did, it convinced me. I mean, what spooked Mrs. Westerman more than anything, she thought, because there's a motorway. I only live a mile from the motorway. It runs right past Pontefract, right past Normanton. She lived on the edge of a housing estate. So it was a beautiful day, plenty of people about. She thought, I'll put the TV on this evening. It'll be on the evening news. Nothing. She bought the local newspaper, which is still published. Not a thing, not a mention. She asked some of her neighbours, you know, nothing. And that really, really, really did puzzle her, you know. And I think it was 2 years ago now, I did an interview and I told this same story, but I just forgot to use the lady's name, Mrs. Westerman. I was emailed by a lady in New Zealand, and she said, I used to live in Normanton. What was the lady's name? So I said, it's Mrs. Westerman. She said, my best friend was called Westerman. She still lives in Normanton.
Wow.
But she changed her name now because she's got married. She said, I'll email her and see if she knows anything. She emailed her friend, and her friend was actually one of those children that I interviewed all those years ago.
That's
She got in
crazy.
touch with me, and I got a statement from her. She put them in bullet points of the things she could remember. Sadly, we've never met because COVID came, and you know, she doesn't want to meet in person. I'm happy with that, but she was one of those children.
That's
And
insane.
that's amazing, you know.
It is.
Philip, have you seen in your years of experience and interviews a lot of people who are the only witnesses in crowds and villages?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. But I've seen the opposite. I'll come to that in a moment.
Okay.
And I'm guessing here. This is purely speculation, but it just seemed that with Mrs. Westerman and those children, you had to be there at that time and place to have this experience. That's the only thing I can think of, because no one else saw it. I could take you to the spot now, and you can hear the motorway. It's a mile away. I can hear it. If I go outside my front door, I can hear this little rumble in the background. That's the motorway. And it's the main one in the northwest of England, with zillions of cars going past every day. We've run the feature. We've run a feature about it in the local newspapers a couple of times. Nothing. Zilch. Nothing.
It's like they were the only ones meant to see it then.
I'll give you another example. It's kind of similar. There's a place in Wales that I can't pronounce the name. I do apologize.
That's okay. That's
The Welsh
okay.
language is very different. But going back to the 1960s, this young fellow was down on the beach with his dad, and at the back of the beach were some rocks. Dad, can I climb up on the rocks? Yeah. So he climbs up on the rocks, and what does he see? He sees a UFO on the ground with a glass dome, but he sees the most peculiar. I don't know if I'll call them beings because I don't have a better word for it, but they're made out of some kind. They look like they're made out of jelly, and it's all moving. These aren't static. And this thing opens up, and he's terrified. So he tears down the rocks. Dad, Dad, Dad. All right, I'll be there in a minute. And he looks up, and all he can see is his son hiding behind these rocks, sticking his head up like that to see these things. But his father didn't see anything. By the time his father got there, it had gone. And it is, I use the thing in the book, I use a phrase over and over again called high strangeness. It was developed by the late Dr. Hynek, and he used this term high strangeness. In other words, the more peculiar and the more detail and the closer you get to these things, the stranger they are, the high strangeness factor, the more likely it is that you're not misidentifying an aircraft. Because if it's a light and it's got red and green lights on it, it's an airplane, So these are what I term high strangeness. They are bizarre in their own rights. And so I've used that throughout the book, and that is one of it. It's a place called, I'll have a go at trying to pronounce it. It's called Macalent. Strange. I probably got it wrong. I apologize.
That's okay. We'll take your word for it. If you can't get it, we certainly won't.
I mean, I come from the north of England. I struggle with English, let alone Welsh.
No.
I just Italianize it. I would just make it sound Italian, so let's not go there.
But so that it was that event in Normanton when I first began, my involvement, that really I thought, well, I'm not wasting my time. These people were either telling the truth or they were lying. There was no, misinterpretation of a helicopter or anything like that. I could find no reason why they would want to lie.
Children were pretty much, they're teller of tall tales, but for the most part, they want to just get it out there too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they didn't want any publicity or anything like that. She was a coal miner's wife. My dad, like I said, was a coal miner. I knew they were the type of people I knew. So for me, she was telling the truth. What she saw, I leave others to their own interpretation. And so I always had a fascination with UFO landing accounts. And I'd accumulated case histories, old and new. And during lockdown, I thought, well, I've been trying to write this book for years. I just never got around to it. So not been allowed out.
No, I got nothing to do but write.
I wrote it, and it's simply called UFO Landings UK.
Right.
That's what it is.
Right.
That will be published by me at Flying Disc Press on May the 1st, and it will be on Amazon.
Ooh,
and it goes right back to accounts, before Kenneth Arnold, right the way through, from all over the UK, and even I think I used one or two cases from the Republic of Ireland.
Wow. Wow.
They used to be part of the UK. They're not now. They're a republic. They're independent. And I don't come to any specific conclusion. What I did, I asked a number of my colleagues, "Do you think these things were? What is this?" So all their comments are there as well, and it allows you to make. I'm not out to indoctrinate anyone. I'm not going to tell you this is what this is or are or what or not. I'll present the information and allow you to decide for yourself. Because every time I think I'm getting close to an answer, something will happen that puts a spanner in the works. And I mentioned that. I said there was this Amelia said, is it all cases where it's just, one individual or a group and nobody else sees anything?
Right.
The case that put the spanner in the works for that, Amelia, is an event that took place in the United States in 1973. October the 11th, 1973, at a place called Pascagoula, Mississippi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Charles
Dr.
Hickson,
Irena Scott talked about that.
Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker were fishing on the Pascagoula River. Charlie was 42, Calvin was almost 19. When a UFO came down behind them, these three strange creatures got over them, took them on board. They had an encounter. Within an hour, they were in the Jackson County, sheriff's office recounting all this.
Right.
They were recorded on a secret tape, just in case they were lying. Calvin especially was terrified. The next day, they were sent to the hospital to be examined. They went to Keesler Air Force Base to be checked for radiation, which proved zero. But the guys at Keesler, bearing in mind, Charlie and Calvin had phoned Keesler Air Force Base first. And they said, we're not interested. Ring the police. They said, while you're here, come and tell us what happened. And it made big news. Now, Charlie died in 2011. Calvin disappeared into the wilderness. He'd only pop up every now and again. He had a breakdown. He tried to commit suicide. So in 2018, I got permission to republish a book that Charles Hickson wrote with a chap called William Mendez in 1983. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to get an interview with Calvin? So I managed to find him. He was very polite, but he didn't really want to know, if I'm honest. Unbeknown to me, his wife, Waynette, had said, why don't you write a damn book? Right. So we agreed. I'm cutting a long story very short. We agreed to write a book. And Calvin produced his own book called Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter. And it hit the headlines, became a bestseller. Curious thing was, the local news did like a little 8-minute mini documentary about Calvin, and they interviewed him, showed the area and so on. Somebody put this on YouTube. And one of the comments underneath it, I'm getting there, honest ladies.
Yes.
A lady said, my mum and dad were on the opposite side of the river that night. And they too saw the UFO.
Oh my God, they needed that validation.
So I got in touch with this young lady. She gave me her mum and dad's phone number. They were called Mr. and Mrs. Blair. I spoke to them. I worked with my colleague, you mentioned there, Dr. Irena Scott. She interviewed them. And, Mr. Blair, to begin with, basically he worked in the fishing industry and he was waiting for a boat to come in. And he was having a sleep in the back of his car. Mrs. Blair's outside. She said, I could see this blue light over the opposite bank of the river. Bear in mind, Charlie and Calvin said their first indication something was going on was this blue light came from behind them.
Right.
And then she said, our boat started to come in. So I'm walking along this little pier. And she says, there's this huge splash in the water next to me. And she said, I look down and there's a grey man in the water. This is not a tiger, it's not a dolphin, it's not a seal, it's a grey man. Mr. Blair described seeing it coming up out of the water. He called it the humanoid. That was his word, not mine.
Yeah. So
Mr. Blair, after about a year, when I first spoke to Maria Blair, Mrs. Blair, she said, there was something bothering her, and she said, I can see something out of my peripheral vision, but I just can't make it out. Something bothered her. Eventually, Mr. Blair sadly took ill, and he was about to have an operation in the hospital, and he wasn't sure if he was going to make it. He insisted on speaking to me and having his wife film him on their mobile phone. And he said, we too had an abduction. And he eventually told my colleague, Dr. Irena Scott, all the things he could remember. He related some of it to Maria. She was, even though he was ill, she was as mad as hell at him. Why didn't you tell me this before? She said, I thought people would think we were nuts.
It's hard. It was mindset back then. Yeah. People just didn't believe.
Mrs. Blair has recounted further details to us as well.
Wow.
And it looks like they did indeed have their own encounter that night on the opposite side of the river. At the same time as Charlie and Calvin. They saw the blue lights anyway. And that's all going to be published next year, because it will be the 50th anniversary next year. But I'll give you another example. A gentleman, Calvin was doing a book signing in the town. And this old chap come up and said, "Can I have a book, Mr. Parker? Thank you." And he signed it. And he just said in passing, "I saw the UFO that night," and walked away. Luckily, somebody was taking photographs. So they have I had this photograph of this gentleman, buying the book. So I put it on social media, and eventually somebody came forward and said, "Oh, I know that fella." And they gave us his phone number. His name was a Mr. Lewis Lee, now retired, of course. But he said, "I was working in the shipyard that night, up in one of the cranes." He said, "As soon as he said, my cab of the crane is about 12 feet off the ground."
Yeah.
He says, "As soon as I got in it, you could see this thing out over the river." I can't do a southern Mississippi accent, ladies. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it. Our producer comes really close. It's okay, we're used to it.
The darndest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And he said, "I watched it for about 10 minutes, and then my colleagues started shouting at me because I've got something on the end of my crane, Right. I said, and when I went back, it had gone.
Mm-hmm.
But other people came forward. There was a gentleman there's a big road bridge goes across the river where this happened, Charlie and Calvin. He's not in the middle of nowhere. It's right by the Highway 90 road bridge.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a secluded location.
Mm-hmm.
And gentleman said, "I'm driving across the bridge with my wife." And he said, "I see this blue thing down below." He said, "I thought it was going to crash."
Hmm.
The next day, he went to visit his aunt. Totally unrelated to this. She lived down by the river. He said, "Before I could open my mouth, she said to me, 'You'll never guess what I saw last night.'" So others and others and others came forward. Then I was contacted by a gentleman in Greece. His name is Stephanos. Stephanos was a Greek UFO researcher, but he was also a merchant seaman. And in 1981, he docked in Pascagoula.
Of course he did, all the way from Greece.
Yeah. So he thought,
my God,
"I want to interview Charlie Hickson." So he went to the newspaper office.
Wow.
Can you tell me where Mr. Hickson lives? So they did. And the guy that did down at the police station said, "I think you should speak to this other chap. He's called a pastor. He was a clergyman, Emmanuel Sigalis, of Greek origin, not from Greek, but of Greek origin."
Mm-hmm.
So Stephanos went to interview Mr. Sigalis, and he said, on that night, October the 11th, 1973, we were driving to a church meeting. It was a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous, dealt with people who had drink problems. He said, "I had my colleague with me and a young lady volunteer in the back seat." And he said, "We saw this damn thing actually go over the road in front of us, down towards where Parker and Hickson were." So, Stephanos interviewed this gentleman. He sadly passed away, but I got a copy of the interview.
Right.
He mentioned the lady's name in the back seat. She was the first to see this thing on its approach. And she was called, just called her Joe. I'll stick with that for now. I do know her name.
Of course.
And we set about last year, because we found a photograph of her, trying to find her. And she doesn't live in the Pascagoula, Mississippi area anymore. And she still works voluntary at a church, but she's retired, and we managed to locate her. And Dr. Irena Scott interviewed her. I contacted her on email. Irena spoke to her on the phone, And she said, yeah, I'm the young lady who was sat in the back of the car that night with Pastor Sigalis. And she recounted exactly the same thing, you know. And she was the last one on our list. Most people came forward. It was amazing. You know,
I think had they come forward initially, then Calvin wouldn't have had these issues, I wonder, because there would have been some sort of camaraderie as, you know, not alone.
I think what happened when they saw Calvin on the TV in 1973 and Charles, they were basically ridiculed. A lot of some newspapers just reported it. Others talked about little green men being on the hooch, you know, drugs, whatever. I mean, Calvin didn't even think. I mean, I've never known a drunk report a UFO sighting.
Right.
Or to give such details.
No. So they now saw Calvin all these years later being treated with respect. And not only that, one of the local charities in Pascagoula raised some money and erected a historical sign at the site, which was officially unveiled by the mayor.
Oh, wow.
And Mrs. Blair turned up with Mr. Blair and met Calvin there for the first time. Oh. So he got validation that others saw it in and around the area. Also across the US in 1973. It's been nicknamed in other publications the year of the humanoids. Now, you know, and we have in our new book coming out next year, we have just one chapter about other things seen elsewhere, you know. But by Calvin being treated with respect,
it opened doors.
It opened doors. People said, "Well, I saw some." But these were just people going about their everyday taxis, you know.
There was less fear, more comfort to come forward.
Here we have the opposite to what we talked about before. We thought initially it was just Charlie and Calvin and nobody else. But as we found out, all these other people, even people just on the other side of the river with their own encounter, all these people saw something that was going on that night, a couple of nights before, and a few nights after. I'll give you another example. I think it's November the 2nd, 1973. So we're talking just a couple of weeks after Charlie and Calvin's encounter. 3 little skiffs, 3 little boats went out on the river, a bit further out from where they were fishing, and they saw something under the water. This thing lit up. It was circular. They described it as looking like a parachute. Remember the old parachutes with segments? And they got close enough to get an oar off the boat and hit it, and it went clunk. So they sailed up to the Coast Guard station that was there and reported it. The Coast Guard went out in their boat and also saw it and also hit it with something, and it went clunk. So we have all the official report of that from the Coast Guard. What was interesting, the Coast Guard the following day lined up all these people. I think there was 8 or 9 of them, and took a photograph of them in color. And on the back of the photograph, they wrote their names and their age. And it's only last year I managed to get a copy of this photograph and their names. And again, I used social media. Within 2 hours, we found out that all but one of these people had passed away. And within 2 days, we'd interviewed that last person who was still alive from that night, who saw this thing under the water, and it went clunk. And Dr. Scott, my colleague Irena Scott, interviewed him on the telephone. He said, nobody's spoken to me about it in all these years, you know. And it's mind-boggling. You know, it literally, it wasn't something they saw in the distance. They actually saw it under the water. It lit up, it went clunk, and they played cat and mouse with it under the water. And we have the US Coast Guard documents detailing it.
It sounds a bit like the Shag Harbor incident that happened in eastern Canada.
Yeah. I know the Shag Harbor thing, but they saw that coming down and
They
splashing.
did, and other witnesses have since come forward and said, "Oh yeah, we saw it from this angle and this angle," and then all
I'll
of a
show
sudden,
you how these people think. To me, in the correct way. Somebody from the U.S. Navy came out the next day.
yeah,
He said to this chap, "Can you show me where it happened?" Yeah, it's just there. It's just water.
yeah, no, we can't really, but here we go.
Oh,
Yeah.
are you dumb? It's just water. There's nothing to see now. It's gone. You know, he thought, what did I send this idiot for? You know, so give you an example of the kind of things that were happening in and around this area and across the US that night. I found a newspaper cutting. One of the main UFO groups at the time was called NICAP, National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And their guy, who was the head of it at the time, said in the newspaper, "We've been inundated with phone calls and sightings since the Hickson and Parker account." Now, I have a colleague in Albuquerque by the name of David Marler. David has the most remarkable UFO archive. And David has all the NICAP files. So I said to David, "Can you just select some of them that took place after the Hickson and Parker account?" And he just said, "How many do you want?" And he just sent me a whole bunch of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this was all reported because they'd seen Parker and Hickson on the TV or the newspaper or whatever. So we have one chapter, we just call it the NICAP files. And it wasn't a question of which files to use, it was a question of which ones can we leave out, because it could go on forever, you know. And so it was amazing. And so that is the opposite to what we were talking about earlier. It's not, we just thought it was Charlie and Calvin, but far from it.
Wow. I think it's fantastic that you have, because that was, quite some time ago. You want to make sure you get all the witnesses, because eventually, much like Mr. Blair, there's not going to be anybody to tell these stories.
Yeah. I mean, we're fortunate. I mean, Calvin's been seriously ill. But
now,
we're fortunate
UFO related?
If you think about Roswell, everybody who was at Roswell is now gone. So you cannot interview anybody. And
it's the big anniversary this year as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The 70th anniversary. My wife said, "You're like a man on a mission." Because I said, well, no disrespect to any of these people, but I'll give you one example. A couple of years back, before the pandemic, it was just before Christmas, and Calvin was in a shop, a store, as you would call it, buying whatever. And a gentleman who he kind of knew vaguely said, "Calvin, I saw something that night." So Calvin says, "I tell you what, let's wait till after Christmas and we'll have a chat." This gentleman sadly passed away in the meantime. So that was a lesson learned. So, whenever we got a whiff of someone possibly seeing something, it was all hands on deck to get an interview of some kind. If they didn't want to be interviewed, fair enough. I think there was only one lady who declined us. And there's only a couple said, "Don't use my real name." Everybody said, "I don't care. I'm at that age now."
The time has passed.
Yeah. It all depends where they are in their lives, and if their family members are opposed to them coming forward as well. It's different for everyone.
And the lady who I mentioned there, called Jo, she was the last on the list that I'm aware of. We are hoping that others may still come forward.
You mentioned illnesses, do you think, well, I mean, do you think there's a connection, Calvin, Mr. Blair, the gentleman who passed, with Calvin's friend?
I personally, I don't think there's any connection.
Yeah, because they're abductees, and then I have to ask, especially when they're testing for radiation and such.
I've asked Calvin, he doesn't rule it out, but Calvin's had heart problems, he's had cancer. But Calvin, he worked as a bounty hunter at one point. I said, you had 6 cowboys not, beat the living daylights out.
I could do it. Yeah, I could do it. Yeah.
I said, it's just one of those things. Even
Mhm.
if it was, you'd never be able to prove it in 1,000 years. So
No.
there's no connection between any of these cases other than these were just ordinary folks going about their everyday life.
Yeah.
This was Calvin's first day at work at the shipyard there. He said, I got
Lucky guy.
Yeah, he said, I got hired, fired, and abducted all in the same day. And it ruined his life.
Wow.
And he's glad he told the story now. He wish, I wish I'd have done it before, but I said, well, we've done it now. And even when we're all dead and gone, it's there forever now. It's there for posterity. People can. I think it's a fantastic case, and I think when we publish the new book next year, people will sit up and take notice. I've made the claim that if we took this case to court, we could prove that something happened to Calvin and Charlie that night. We couldn't prove they were abducted by aliens, but we could prove beyond reasonable doubt that something happened.
They had the experience, especially with the Blairs who came forward. Like that validates so much. Example. Right.
I said to Calvin, have you got any photographs, documents? He said, I lost everything in Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So, okay, so he's starting to write the book. I said, I'll set about seeing what I can find. So who was around in 1973? What UFO groups were around? Of course, Alan Hynek appeared on site within 2 days.
Blue Book. Yep.
So I went to the Center for UFO Studies, which Hynek founded later that year in 1973. They sent me a file, a PDF file, and everything they had. Most of this is newspaper cuttings, but right in the middle of it is a 1-page typewritten document done on an old typewriter. You can tell because they've got the date wrong. I used to use one myself. They've gone back over it and typed over it.
Right.
October the 13th, 1973. So it's 2 days after the abduction. And it talks about giving the 2 gentlemen, Charlie and Calvin, a physical examination of the body where they were examined. And they found puncture wounds on Charlie's arm and on Calvin's foot.
Okay.
And it said, we have the photographs here to go with it. Now, in this file, there were no photographs. And don't ask me why, I don't know. So I said to Calvin, who examined you? He said, well, Dr. James Harder was working with Hynek. He examined us. He said, I can't remember any photographs, but Calvin was, terrified.
Right. No kidding.
But we got no photos. So we have this puncture wounds document. And it's intriguing. And it mentions photographs. Last year, out of the blue, the same gentleman who sent me the file from the Center for UFO Studies said, Philip, I've been going through some old files looking for something. I came across these photos that I assume you've already got, but I thought I'd better send you them anyway. Guess what they are? They are the photographs mentioned in the puncture wounds document. You see Charlie Hickson's arm, he's got his arm like that, but on the inside you see these marks. And there's Calvin's foot with these 3 dots underneath his
3.
foot. Yeah. Not only that, it sent me copies of the reverse side of the photograph because they've written the date and who was who. That's how you know which photo. I'm mentioning something here now that we haven't mentioned any details of it. Calvin, down the years, has undergone regressive hypnosis. He went under regression again just recently. And while he's on board the UFO, he said, these creatures have taken my shoes and socks off. And they're doing something with my foot. And it hurts.
Okay. Did they ever identify the puncture wounds? Sorry, Philip.
then we have these photographs of Calvin's foot with these 3 marks on it. He doesn't remember the photographs being taken. He's an honest man. He could have said, "Oh yeah, Dr. Harder took them." Yeah, but he didn't. He said no. And it's quite bizarre. It really is. Another interesting thing that was mentioned by Calvin under hypnosis, before they'd seen anything, he's actually standing there with his rod in the water. He's fishing. He's looking out across the river. The hypnotherapist says, "What can you see, Calvin?" "Oh," he says, I can see this ship." So he said, "I always wondered how a big ship like that, made out of metal, could float. Isn't it amazing? I could see the bridge, And he said, "I can see some figures on the other side of the river. Are those figures Mr. and Mrs. Blair?"
Oh, wow. We're going to hold that note real quick because we have to do a station ID and sponsor ID.
I have a question.
Back up.
I have a question. There's a lag. I don't want to interrupt you again. You're listening to The Outer Realm today with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. Our special guest tonight is Philip Mantle, all the way from the UK, and we are discussing UFO landings in the United Kingdom. We are airing right now on 105.3 FM radio. We are United Public Radio in the beautiful city of New Orleans. We are streaming on YouTube's UFO Paranormal, I hope, International Public Radio, and UFO Gods and ET Radio, as well as all of our Facebook books, tongue-tied, too early in the afternoon today, group pages, and of course, the special ones being Canada's Most Haunted, and of course right here on the Outer Realms Facebook page. A huge thanks to award-winning composer Dr. Snick the Sonic Surgeon, aka Justin Snicker, for our fabulous intro and outro. You can purchase his music and check him out on Amazon and Bandcamp, and you can find Justin on social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram, and I'm sure he's everywhere else as well. And last but not least, the most important here tonight and every night, thank you, Folgers, for being with us since the beginning. Thank you for sponsoring our show and supporting us. We love you very much. So now we can breathe. I just have one question before you continue this story, because I'm so sorry. I apologize there's a lag for me, so I apologize for interrupting you. These puncture wounds, did they ever identify, I'm coming from a criminal mind, did they ever identify what caused the puncture wounds? Did they ever say, was there a measurement with them next to the photos?
Not at all. These are just amateur photographs taken by, we assume, Dr. Harder, because he wrote the document about puncture wounds. And we assume it's by him. So, Calvin didn't own a camera. Neither of them wore a watch, believe it or not. But they are intriguing. So you have the 2 gentlemen right from day one said we felt something on our arm. Calvin said it made us relaxed. So they talked about this. Then out of the blue, in the middle of this file is a document, that mentions these puncture wounds. And then a couple of years down the line, totally unrelated, the photographs of these marks turn up. And Calvin, I said before, but it didn't really, they're doing something with his feet. Now we have this evidence. Does it support what he's saying? Can we prove the physical element to this encounter? I.e., he said they're taking my shoes and socks off, and it hurts. And look, hey presto, we have a picture of his foot, with these marks underneath it.
Everything's tying together finally.
The person I'm telling this, by the way, and then the hypnotherapist before the encounter happens asked him what he's doing. Well, he's fishing. What can you see? I can see these figures over the other side of the river. I've just asked the question because we'll never know. Was that Mr. and Mrs. Blair? I don't know. Is the answer, but it's certainly intriguing, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. It would have been really interesting if the Blairs had said, "Oh yeah, we saw somebody across the way fishing."
Yeah. Well, Mr. Blair, part of the time, was he was in a bad mood because his boat was late, so he eventually decided to try and have a nap in the back of the car.
Right. Right.
And it was
Wow.
Maria that then saw he saw the blue lights, she saw them. She said it looked like it was either going to crash or it was as if it didn't know where it was going. It was moving around.
It's interesting because there's not a lot of stories out there with so many validations and witness accounts coming together, to form the whole picture. There's you hear about pieces of the puzzle, but you don't often have people coming forward, especially years later, with such vivid detail.
Well, not only that, these two gentlemen were in the sheriff's office within hours, being interviewed and recorded. The next day, they went to Keesler Air Force Base. Although it wasn't recorded, they used a stenographer. We actually have a transcript of the whole conversation.
Very good.
So they told the story from day one. There have been slight alterations. That's what stories do over time.
Memory, besides.
Calvin also talks about seeing this female creature. I won't tell you the words that he calls her because she hurts him.
Yeah.
What did he call her when he saw her?
Well, there you go. But so I may be bragging a little bit. I don't know if that's the right word, but I think it's the best documented abduction account on the record. If we look at the other sort of major ones, Betty and Barney Hill, well, nobody saw anything. It was largely down to the hypnosis. I don't doubt them. Please don't get me wrong. Travis Walton, nobody saw what happened to Travis after he got shot with the lightning bolt. His colleagues disappeared, and then when they came back, he'd gone. So here you have all these independent people coming forward and saying, we saw this, and Mr. and Mrs. Blair saying we had our own encounter involving the same creatures, by the way.
Right. But then you have a guy from Greece, you have a woman from New Zealand. Like they really come together. It's just like the dots were meant to be connected, and they're finding you from everywhere.
I didn't know Stephanos until I published Calvin's book, and he saw me on Facebook, and he contacted me. And he'd written all this up. I've actually published a little book of him, all about his trip to Pascagoula and how it all happened, and the people he interviewed, and he gave us a lead. We eventually, a few years down the line, found the lady who was sitting in the back seat of the car that night. Saw this thing go over the road, and that's been our mission is to document. Again, with the book, we've documented everything. Some people are not happy when you use hypnosis. We've never forced anybody to do that. For example, you mentioned in your promo there some music. One of the most famous pop groups or rock bands, whatever you want to call them, in the world is Fleetwood Mac.
Yes.
Fleetwood Mac wrote a song called "Hypnotized," and it is based on the Calvin and Charlie encounter.
Oh, it really?
I didn't know that. It was based on that. She always has something.
It's a great song, and it's partly based on Charlie and Calvin. When Calvin's book came out, two local musicians called Johnny Cobb and Johnny McCoy wrote a song called "Blackwater Blue Moon," all about Charlie and Calvin's encounter. A lady in Norway wrote a techno track, and on it, whose voice booms out halfway through, Calvin Parker.
Wow.
And this went out across the nightclubs and the discos across Scandinavia and Europe.
Right.
And we even uncovered a 1976 two-part TV film that had been made in Italy, all about Charlie and Calvin. I've got a copy. I can't understand a word of it, of course. It's all in Italian.
Oh, I can translate it for you.
It's all right,
Yeah.
But nobody knew any of this existed.
Right.
No, I didn't know until now. You're telling
So
us.
there's all these other things, Again, there's a local musician. I can't remember his name. The old boy. he wrote a song simply called the Pascagoula UFO, and he's on the banjo, and he went down and recorded it himself and had some records made. He has one left, and he came forward with a recording of it. I've got the recording, but he's kept that record. He's kept people have been saying record, vinyl. It's just a vinyl 45, and even Charles Hickson recorded his story on a record. I have one of the records here and the recording on it. So there's all these other little branches that come off from this story. But going back to it, it is a fascinating account, and I'm sure between now and getting the book out next year, something else will crop up and surprise us. I don't know what, but I'm sure it will.
It's meant to. I think it's all finding you right now. You got the ball rolling, and now it just seems to be throwing itself at you. I have no doubt you'll complete the tale for sure.
But one of the things you notice in my new book, UFO Landings UK, is people say, is there any similarities between this, that, and the other? What the book shows you is the dissimilarities. There is a mixture of every. I told you about the jellymen from Wales. There is things so bizarre, and there's a couple of cases in there. I thought, shall I publish these? They are so bizarre. I thought, well, no, I have to, and people can make up their own mind about them, and we go back to the 1940s. A chap I actually interviewed myself many years ago, and he was in the military at the time, and he was walking back to his barracks late one night, and he met this creature by the side of the road, just off back, and it had this box on its chest, shining this light into its face, and it had this strange look on its face, and behind them was this dome-shaped object on the ground. And it terrified the living daylights out of this chap, who couldn't get back to the barracks fast enough. And he was late getting back, so he had to sneak in through a window. And he woke one of his colleagues up, and he told him all about it, And I interviewed this old boy in person. And he said, if I'd have had my gun with me, Philip, he said, although I was in uniform with no arms with us, he said, if I had my gun with it, I'd have shot it. Because this was 1942, the middle of the Second World War. He said, I would have shot it. But he said, terrified the living daylights out of me. So it's the differences that stand out. People are about their everyday, ordinary routine, and these things happen. Right. And you make of it what you will.
Well, they're definitely different. You have your standard stories, I mean, I've seen UFOs several times throughout my life, especially where I am now. They're pretty regular occurrence. But this is pretty much the standard. There's nothing real special. You see lights in the sky. Some people get, photographs. Some people just see them shooting right out of the river. You have others where you get flashes of light that just go gone right in the sky, just gone. They just appear and they're just gone. It's like, okay,
Well, I think the skeptics have even moved. Right. Not skeptics, I'm a bit skeptical. I mean, the debunkers. I mean, the main debunker of Charlie and Calvin's case was the late Philip Glass. Passed away a few years back, and I got a copy of his whole file on the case, and he basically, all he was trying to do was throw mud at it, and he couldn't find any.
Right.
He was trying to throw dirt at it, and he couldn't find any. But he just labeled it a hoax, even though he had no evidence it was. Then I think it was 2013, one of the Skeptics Society gentlemen wrote his own article on the Parker and Hinkson case. And he now had moved the goalpost. He called it I can't pronounce it, but excuse me, I'll have a go. Fila d'Ur. It's basically is a, you have two people, one with a strong personality, one with a weak personality. The strong one has some kind of fantasy, and he forces it on the other one, and they both then think it's real. The thing is about that takes a period of time, for it to work. This happened, in an instant. They weren't even planning to go fishing that night. They weren't best of mates.
Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody would subject themselves to everything that they went through, to the police department. Usually, if you're trying to put off a hoax, I think it's the last place you want to go. And you're certainly not going to let people poke and prod you in a medical manner. Like, that alone.
No.
It's intrusive.
But the point is that the debunkers had moved. They've gone from hoax, always it might have been some kind of fantasy, so that the hoax explanation had failed. Well, we got to come up with another one. Well, I'm sorry, guys, I'll come up with a better one than that.
Right. Right.
What about all these other people now? And I had somebody say, well, you can't rely on people's memories from 50 years ago. I said, well, okay, I understand that. So are you telling me that everybody who writes their own autobiography, you can't believe it? Because, if I'm 63, almost 64, if I were to sit down and write my own autobiography, are you saying that it can't be, it's baseless because I can't possibly remember something from 50 years ago? Well, no, I'm not saying that. I said, well, yes, you are. You're saying you can't, but I said, we haven't just got one or two people here. We've got lots.
Well, now you have several. Now you can't debunk it that easily.
So I said, even if one or two got, couldn't quite remember the exact date or the exact time, if you take an average of all these things, it's still, I said, it's like an old criminal case, something that happened years ago, and they find the guy that did it and they take him to court and they wheel out the old witnesses. They're saying we can't rely on them because this happened all. So if that's the case, now we can't do any historic criminal investigations. They've all got to be scrapped because I said, shut up, because you're talking rubbish,
Right. No, it's true.
Yeah, but it's a fascinating case, and it I don't know what's going to happen next, but something will, I guarantee it. If it does, ladies, I will let you know.
Oh, I think when you and Irena get your book out, maybe you can come on together and talk about it if you'd like.
Well, here's one thing that Irena came up with. On October the 11th, 1973, the same night, the Parker Hickson account, she was away from home. She lives in Ohio. She was studying for I think it was her PhD. And she got a phone call from her mum, who was back in Ohio. And she said, we've just heard this huge explosion, this huge sonic boom. And it went halfway across the United States.
She told that to us on the show. We were like, wow.
That is insanity.
She's a scientist. This is a lady that's worked at, top places, and she cannot find a rational explanation for it. She's made the statement, and I believe her 100%. It's the second loudest noise ever recorded on Earth because it left shockwaves.
Crazy.
And she's gone through what could have possibly caused it, and she can't find an answer. Again, it happened on October the 11th, 1973, same night, the Parker and Hickson encounter and all these other things. Is there a connection? I don't know.
Something opening, portal, or tearing through dimensionally. It's curious.
Yeah.
It's a curiosity because that sort of sound, you look right now, even like with the threat of, when the atomic bomb went off, it just caused this ripple effect dimensionally, they say, and it attracted this attention. Like, what are you guys up to over there? Nuclear facilities, earthquakes, volcanoes, there's always UFOs.
But when they exploded the first bomb at Trinity, you couldn't hear it halfway across the United States. The noise was pretty much local, a few miles around.
Yeah, right.
This noise was heard when you say halfway across the United States. That's a big distance.
That's a big distance. Yeah.
I've done a lecture tour across the United States, and I was amazed that every time I got off the damn plane, I had to change the time on my watch.
Yes. You can go through a few time zones in one day.
Yeah, with only a small little thing,
Right. Yeah,
so
that's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. Whether there's a connection, again, will allow others, but it all happened on this same night. You know?
That's the curiosity right there. It'd be interesting to see what the connection is.
But then we have the opposite, as I mentioned, half an hour ago.
Yeah.
With Mrs. Westerman.
Yes.
And the local UFO landing case in broad daylight in an urban area with population, not a peep, not a sound, nobody saw a thing.
And there it is, full day.
But I believe that lady and those children 100%.
Well, yeah, so, kids will tell it like it is, if anything, and they don't want to be known. They weren't looking for notoriety. They just
the only way she got my phone number is because I'd done a piece in the local newspaper, and she saw it, and it ran my phone number.
Of course.
So you make of it what you will, ladies, but it does show how bizarre the UFO phenomenon is, and
it really is.
Which when you think, I'm on. One thing that I have noticed that I think we should look into further. I mentioned my first book. It goes back to 1994. It's called Without Consent. It's all about missing time and abduction cases. I updated it a couple of years ago, so it's still around. But when I was interviewing these people, and I did a lot of them in person, they went on to add down the years, because some of them were historic cases that I was revisiting. I'd find them after all these years. But I interviewed one young man down in Wales, at a place called Pwllheli in northwest Wales. He was only 18 at the time. And he said he'd got a job in the local hotel. This is after his encounter. And he said, Philip, don't you dare. He had long hair, denim jacket, like rock music, like I used to do when I was his age. He said, I've started writing spontaneous poetry. He said, and it'll come, and I just have to write it, and it's all related to his encounter. We had a lady from Northampton, or near Northampton in the Midlands, called Elsie Oakenson. Elsie was, shall we say, in her 50s, 60s, and she, after the event, she became a spiritual healer, and she put it down to what happened to her that particular night of her encounter. Going back to the 1970s, I interviewed a chap, and I found him many years later, and I've actually found him working in like an artist's commune, and he made the most beautiful dolls' houses. And they were works of art. You would never let your children play with them had you bought one.
Right.
So with a number of these people, there was how can I say, an artistic or a spiritual side effect. I'll call it a side effect. I don't know of a better phrase. It changed them, or they became interested or involved in environmental issues. Calvin talks about his first encounter on board the UFO. This female showed him some kind of mirror where he had visions of the past, present, and the future. And the future was not good. Same with the young man in Pwllheli. He was lying on this slab, this table, and he saw this screen, and he was shown apocalyptic visions of Earth's future. So I think these are questions we should be asking the individuals.
Doing further research.
If we go and speak to them and say, what happened, what time, where was it, what did it look like, and we come away with that documentation. Are we missing other things, like was there any paranormal phenomena reported in this area, or you haven't seen anything else? How have you been since the event? Well, you never guess. I've taken up painting. The only thing I ever painted before was my bathroom ceiling,
Right. Yeah.
So there are some individuals, it did seem to have an effect, and these were the side effects that came off it. I think it's something we might bear in mind. Certainly I do now when I speak to these people, for future reference. It may be nothing, but it may be something. It might be something we've been missing.
I definitely think it opens the door for another show because there are lots of stories where people have those kind of encounters, messages, and there's a lot of stories out there, but you don't really see or hear stories with these kind of messages.
Yeah.
But we're coming to the end of the segment, so this is the part of the show where you tell everybody what you have coming up, how to find you, promote.
Yeah, I mean, the new book, UFO Landings UK, is published on May the 1st. You'll find it on Amazon in a variety of formats, paperback, hardback, Kindle. We're hoping there'll be an audio book as well. That's underway. Or you can just go to flyingdiscpress.com. That's disc with a K.
Excellent.
All our books are there. I publish books from people all over the world. So they're all there, and I'm on Facebook, so I'm easy to find if anybody's looking for me. You'll never forget this face.
Any stories? There's your guy right there.
Yeah, contact him.
Exactly. That's the man you want to give your story to right here.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot happening, and I'll have more books out as the year progresses. As Amelia said, it's the 75th anniversary of UFOs and Roswell this year.
Yes.
So July the 1st, we'll see a new book out by Kevin Randall on Roswell. It's called Understanding Roswell.
Yes.
So there
excellent.
you go. And a lot more later in the year.
Yes, excellent. And I'm looking forward to getting emails about that so we can start booking more of your people.
You can't escape now.
Yes, no, we love it. We love it.
We're grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, but thank you so much for joining us. It's just been so enlightening. I'd love to do it again. I will be in touch, and let's look at at future dates as well.
My pleasure, Michelle. There's a lot happening, and long may it last. Thank you very much for allowing me as the guest this evening. Thank you.
Pleasure. Our pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm just going to pop you out for one quick minute while we finish off the show, and we'll be right back. Well, everyone, thank you so much. You guys are going to love this show. Big thank you to Folgers. Big thank you to Dr. Snick. Big thank you to Philip Mantle. And we will see you all in chat. Of course, by the time you get this, we will all be in chat. So have yourselves all a great evening. Don't forget, Amelia and I, tomorrow, round table, chat room will be open. You asked, we're doing it. Good night.
You have been listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano, airing live every Wednesday and Thursday evening, 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 to 10 p.m. Central, on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.